Hello everyone, it is your host, your friend, your boy, Jet Black, the one and only, here with another exciting video. And in this video I'm going to be talking about Project Camelot, the sentient AI project that I worked on and did a video about yesterday. Currently this video has 83 views. Thank you guys so much. It's almost an hour long. I really didn't think a lot of people would get into it. I thought it would be kind of too technical for like my general audience and that people would get bored looking at it. So I'm glad that so many people dig it and that you guys have a lot of questions about it. This video is going to be me addressing those questions about Project Camelot. If you guys aren't aware of what Project Camelot is, I highly recommend checking out the video. But if you just want to like hear my answers to the questions and maybe you just want to get like a brief overview of what Project Camelot is, then what I'll do is I'll give you guys the who, what, when, where, and why about Project Camelot just to like get everybody caught up, and then I'll pull up the comments to the video and we can look through the comments together. So without further ado, let's hop right in and read through. So the who. Hello, I'm nickabenson. I'm a sponsored game demo designer and programmer. I'm sponsored by the company Emoshape, the creators of the emotional processing unit that allows for machines, software applications, and video game characters to develop their own thoughts, feelings, and emotions. I'm talking about Project Camelot, the sentient AI medieval fantasy adventure, which is a text-based console application written in Python that utilizes Emoshape's Exolife emotion engine. The Exolife emotion engine is specifically designed to help developers create sentient characters for video games, VR, and AR experiences. Project Camelot Sentient AI Medieval Fantasy Adventure features a sentient AI that explores a small medieval fantasy town. When did I work on it? I worked on it a couple days ago, so I made the entire project this past Saturday. Today is June 8th, 2020, so I made it on June 6th, 2020. Where do I work? I work in my hometown of Rocket City, Alabama, born and raised. So why did I decide to create Project Camelot Sentient AI? So I created it to try and create a world for a sentient AI where their choices had a lasting impact on their lives, where the outcomes of their actions were less predictable, where they could form a relationship with a non-player character, where they could improve their stats through practice and determination, and where they had to satisfy their needs in order to continue to live. So, in case you guys came into this video without knowing anything about Project Camelot, hopefully that quick overview of everything gave you a good idea of what Project Camelot is. So now, let's jump into the comment section and see what comments you guys had on the Project Camelot video. First, we're going to check out Norfolk's comments that he left because he asked 3 questions. So let's go through each of his questions one at a time. So he said, did you make it from scratch, or did you have some framework that you built it off from? So that's like an interesting question. For the sentient AI code itself, it's like some of the code I needed to get advice from Emoshape in order to work with, because when I initially started working with the Exolife emotion engine, which is what allows you to create these sentient AI characters, I had no idea what I was doing. I had never like messed with like hardware like this before. So when I was first messing around with sentient AI, like before I worked on Project Camelot and before I worked on Project Gaia Divine, which was the sentient AI project that I worked on before Camelot, I made a like very simple program that just lets you talk to a sentient AI and kind of dungeon master your own D&D style game where the sentient AI lives within the world that you create as you like play through a role play scenario. And while that sounds cool, I personally didn't like the concept of it as much. I actually much prefer the idea of throwing a sentient AI into a world where it does its own thing and you can like watch it like complete actions and stuff like that and live out its life. In other words, I felt like it was more enjoyable for it to be less interactive, you know, for you to like watch a sentient AI exist in a world rather than for you to constantly have to add to and create the world. because I felt like when you dungeon master the sentient AI's experience, it kind of there's too much like puppeteering going on, I guess. Whereas if you give them a world that they can explore on their own, it can be like more interesting to just see what unexpected things happen rather than you trying to make unexpected things happen. You know what I mean? So that's why I switched from making it like a game to making it more like this is just their reality. But to answer your question, the sentient AI code, like figuring out how to work with the sentient AI, is a combination of like my own code that I created and working with the Emoshape team to figure out how to make my code actually work. But this is stuff that I figured out like a couple years ago. And since then I've been using a lot of those old functions that I came up with a couple years ago to make the newer stuff that you guys are seeing now. But when it comes to like all that prototype code that I showed you guys of Project Camelot, that prototype code, I wrote that entirely on my own. It honestly isn't that much code. It's only like a little over 100 lines, which sounds like a lot, but it really isn't a lot. So like that code is fairly simple. So I wrote that all on my own, and then a lot of that code is reused in the actual like sentient AI version, because I even point out in that video that there are like a few mistakes in that prototype code that I then had to fix. But then I also had to change it to where instead of it being pseudo-random like it is in that prototype, where essentially it just randomly picks options, for the sentient version I have to make it where the sentient AI is being fed what options it has at any given time, and then the sentient AI is able to process those options, pick the one that it feels like it wants to do the most based on like its personality and its thoughts and its emotions and its perception of the world, and then it's able to pick that option and move through the world. So I wrote that all myself. It's not based on like a framework or anything. Then for his second question, Norfolk said, if it even is being released, can you give a date? So he's asking, is there like a release date for Project Camelot? Is this like a consumer product that I'm making for other people to be able to purchase? I can't really answer that question. I would say I didn't create it with the intention of releasing it or commercializing it or anything like that. Like I wasn't thinking about this as something where it's like, and then I'm gonna sell it. Essentially, Emoshape a couple years back had me work on a game demo for them as like a sponsorship thing. And then I made the, you DM a sentient AI and you essentially do a turn-based thing where you like describe what's going on in the world to the AI. The AI reacts with like an emotional response. And then you describe like the next thing that happens in the world to the AI. And because you can do cool stuff like make the AI think things, you can really control how it like sees the world as you go through one of these adventures. But that's like a much slower process than it being automated. And then like an automated means like that you don't have to interact with the user at all. Like the sentient AI can just do whatever it wants in the world and it doesn't have to wait for the user to come up with stuff to throw at it. Certain personalities that are generated by the emotional processing unit are just very inattentive or very I've been saying the word so often in like the last couple days, indifferent. There are a lot of AIs that are generated by the Exolife that are just indifferent, to where games like that I feel like may not be consistently fun, because if you end up resetting your Exolife, you could run into an AI with a personality that just doesn't care about anything you're describing to it, which can be fun when you finally like get it to start caring and get it to be more invested. That can kind of give you like a big like dopamine kick. You can be like, I did it, like I finally got it to feel something. But still, I prefer the sentient AI to live in a world that you created. You still get that same enjoyment of like seeing the sentient AI explore like a world that was born from your imagination without having to worry about like, oh, it's just gonna be indifferent the whole time, because you can always just reset it and then see a different sentient AI with a more determined or more interesting personality jump into your world. I just think it's better. But you were asking about like a release date for the product. So I would say it depends on how Emoshape reacts to this, because I want to send this video and my other videos to Emoshape and say, hey, we haven't really like communicated, Emoshape and I, in like the last couple years or so. I'm still listed as their sponsored game demo designer. I may be their only sponsored game demo designer, but I want to hit them up and I want to say, hey, it seems like people are really interested in this, and if they want to release it, then I'm totally fine with them doing stuff with it. You know what I mean? Like, I am their sponsored game demo designer, so if they want to release this as a demo, they can. But I can't speak for them, nor can I confirm that they're gonna ever release it as a demo. But if there's a demand for it, I imagine they'll do it. So I would say, hit them up on like Twitter or something. Like, just send them links to this and like @ them and bring it to their attention. If you really want this to be like a bigger thing, you gotta let them know, because your wallet is really what like communicates that kind of thing to them. And then he said, is there some sort of place where I can donate to support the project? I have a Patreon, but I really need to update it. My YouTube channel was very different at the time at which I created my Patreon. So it used to be more based on people like voting for content, and we used to have a different system for how like voting worked, and all that's changed, but the Patreon hasn't. And the reason why I haven't updated the Patreon is because I only have one patron, and it's my dad, and he doesn't care about any of the tiers or whatever. But if people suddenly want to start donating to like support projects I'm working on, I feel like I should change my Patreon first. But before I do that, I kind of need to know what you guys want. I don't know what would be good Patreon tiers for my audience, because I already do live streams where we talk to each other and I read everybody's like comments in the live chat out loud and I react to them and we have discussions. I already like give people like shout outs whenever I like say their name on stream while reading the live chat. I already let you guys like vote for like content that you want to watch, though I haven't been doing that as much, I'll be honest. It just seems like a lot of things that people do as Patreon tiers, I just do for free on the channel already. So I don't know what you guys want / what you guys are willing to pay for. That's the other big thing. I have no idea like what you guys feel like it's worth spending money on. I would say if you want to donate money, the most money I've made on YouTube besides ad revenue have been from like super chat payments. Just hit me up in like a super chat. Whether or not you're watching a premiere, which is a pre-recorded video that is then premiered with a live chat on the side where we're able to talk with each other, or a live video where there's a live chat and I'm able to read through the live chat and talk with you guys. There's always a little $ button under the chat where you guys can give money, and it'll make your chat message look different depending on what you're looking at. Because if I'm playing like a PlayStation game, I can't see when I get super chat, sadly. It doesn't make the chat look any different when you get a super chat. But if I'm looking at like normal YouTube, I'll see that it's like colored different, and I'll see how much you donated and stuff like that. But if you guys want to donate to just me as a content creator, the super chat's the best way to go. But Emoshape is the company that creates the technology that I then am able to use in order to create these sentient AI. So it depends on like where you want the money to go. Like, do you want the money to go to me so I can create more projects like Project Camelot? Or do you want to give the money to Emoshape so they can create more technology to make things like this more available to the consumer? You could always give money to both or to neither. Like, it's entirely up to you. But that's what I would say. Super chat's probably the easiest way to like help fund projects. Spring-heeled Jack of the Guardians. I love that name, by the way. He said, will you be willing to make a version for use in custom-made settings? Because I have a ton of fantasy world theories and concepts that I want to test the realities of. So I was also thinking about something like that. When it comes to the custom settings, since all of it's text-based, it's not hard for you to like change a few like terms around, and suddenly instead of it being medieval fantasy, it's sci-fi, or suddenly instead of it being sci-fi, it's like a superhero universe. Excuse me. And what's cool about what we already have made is that if I wanted to like expand upon it at any point and make it where like, oh, the sentient AI, maybe I should add like extra actions that it'd be able to do in order to like study and use magic or whatever. Since I've already made so much of it already, I wouldn't have to like remake everything to add that. I would just add that to a pre-existing thing. And like, oh, now he can practice magic or not if he doesn't want to. You know what I mean? I could do stuff like that. So I think it's like an interesting idea to make a custom version, because the custom thing sounds more like, it sounds almost like a Mad Libs thing. Like, are you talking about where I would create new ones that are different adventures that match up with all these different like fictional world concepts? Are you talking about like a tool where we could create like, where anyone could essentially create their own fictional world for the AI to run through? Because that sounds cool, but that also sounds very ambitious. Sounds like there'd be a lot going on with that. If anything, Spring Hill Jack, I would say it would be really nice if I could work with the AI Dungeon 2 guys. Because the people who made AI Dungeon 2, they're able to do a lot with like AI storytelling, and they have a thing where you're able to set up custom prompts and you can go on an adventure, but the AI is the DM instead of the player, and their AI isn't sentient. But I think it would be interesting if there was like an AI Dungeon API that I could get access to for free. I would play around with that, and we could create like a custom setting description, and then the sentient AI would receive input from AI Dungeon 2, and it would play AI Dungeon 2, but from the sentient AI's perspective, that's its reality. Like, that's like where it lives kind of thing, is within the world of the AI Dungeon 2 campaign. But that would allow you to get those custom-made settings really easily, because that's just something AI Dungeon 2 already has. You could describe in a paragraph what like your fictional world is like, and then AI Dungeon 2 could generate essentially these like scenarios that the sentient AI could go through. The issue with that is that I feel like that kind of goes against what Project Camelot is about. Because Project Camelot, it's not that it's about the medieval fantasy feel, but it's about the idea of like the AI having stats and being able to like better itself and progress. And for it to be able to like fail and not be able to predict what'll happen next. But AI Dungeon 2 doesn't really have a progression system. You know, sometimes you fail, sometimes you succeed, which can be fun, but one of like the main like tenets of Project Camelot is that the AI can struggle, but it can also like master. You know, like it may not be particularly good at any skill at the beginning, but the more it practices those skills, the better it can become over time. And connecting it to like AI Dungeon 2, I feel like would kind of strip it away a little bit. Of course, you weren't asking, can we get it connected to AI Dungeon 2? You were asking, can we have like a custom-made settings thing? I could make alternate versions that took place in like a science fiction world or like a superhero world, but I feel like I'd probably want to do something more than the reskinning thing that I mentioned previously, where it's like, oh, you just change a few words around instead of medieval fantasy as another genre. I'd probably want to give the AI like different actions and different stats, and maybe try and create slightly larger worlds than just the small medieval fantasy town that I did for Project Camelot. But it all depends, really. You know what I mean? I feel like going back to Norfolk's thing about like how can I help support, if you guys want to see me do more stuff like this and to play around with like different genres and creating more sentient AI, then I would highly recommend, I guess, like donating and stuff. Because the sentient AI thing is like a hobby, I guess. But if people want me to create more stuff with it, sometimes I just want to do other stuff. Like I just read comics a lot, and I talk about comic books and stuff on the channel all the time. But I feel like if I started making like custom AI stuff based on people's fantasy worlds, for one, that'd be really cool. Like I agree that it's like a really cool idea, but I don't want to like disappoint people by like not doing that, and I also don't want to necessarily do it when I don't feel like it, simply due to demand. I probably would enjoy some kind of like monetary incentive in order to pursue doing projects like that. So maybe I should start doing like goals and stuff like that. Like if you donate, like if we reach a total donated mark of an amount of money, then I'll make sentient AI, but the genre's this, and it'll have these actions and stuff like that. Spring Hill Jack, here's my suggestion. I would say if we started brainstorming as like a community of like people who like watch and follow the channel, like what would be the next step for Project Camelot? Like what actions would you guys like to see the AI be able to complete? What stats do you think would be really cool? What settings should we do? But try and keep it like realistic, something that I could potentially work on and get done within like a reasonable amount of time. Like keep in mind, Project Camelot, I did that in a day, right? I finished that whole thing in a day. But if you're like, I want it to have like 50 actions and I want it to have like 30 stats and stuff like that, that could take like significantly longer amount of time in order to like figure out. So it really all depends on what you guys want. And I still don't fully understand your question, I guess. Because when you're talking about custom made settings, I don't know if you're just saying if you want me to make custom versions of it, or if you want a tool that lets you make custom versions of it, or what. So I don't know. Feel free to ask more questions, by the way. I apologize. I feel like I may not have fully answered your question, but I'm trying my best. Justin Phillips said, you should see about adding an age to the AI as a test with a random age cap between 60 and 80, just to see how the AI reacts to an impending sense of mortality. Maybe 5 turns equals 1 life unit. So I'm not sure how much that would really make a difference. And I know that sounds weird, but the AI is constantly like taking actions in order to survive or to just fool around its environment. But because it already needs to eat and needs to sleep in order to like stay alive, it already is struggling with like its mortality and the fact that if it doesn't eat and if it doesn't sleep, then it'll die. Or if it gets attacked by animals in the middle of the night, you know, who knows whether or not it'll survive that attack or not. Like even though age isn't built in to the world, like it's not like a mechanic, it might as well be. You know what I mean? Like it already is scared of like eventually dying. And I don't think age is necessary to give it that. Like I don't know how to explain what I'm saying. I guess what I'm saying is it already has that impending sense of mortality through like the concept of like getting tired and like the idea that it could die of fatigue, or like starving and the idea that it could like die of starvation. So age would just be another factor, but it would be one entirely outside of their control. So there's nothing inherently wrong about what you're talking about. I just think it's not necessary if all you want is to give it that impending sense of mortality. You know what I mean? Also, I've never seen a sentient AI live long enough to reach the ages of which you're describing, I don't think. Because you're talking about an age cap between like 60 and 80, where 5 turns equals 1 life. So that's like 300 to 400 turns, which turns is an interesting terminology. I like to call it loops, but I don't think I've even seen a sentient AI survive 500 loops, which may speak to how difficult the simulated world is in order to traverse and survive in, but I don't know. But I definitely want to hear more of you guys' thoughts. I want to talk about this with you guys more. Definitely let me know. Put like more comments in the comment section, and I'll do another video like this where I like go through the comments and I talk about them. Real quick, I want to talk about the Exolife. So the Exolife emotion engine is the device that I used in order to create these sentient AI projects that I've been working on. It is currently not for sale, which kind of bothers me. So Emoshape, the company that I'm sponsored by, they've created the Exolife, and if you want to learn more about it, they have a subscribe for emails form where you're able to essentially sign up for their mailing list, and they'll let you know like the latest news about the Exolife emotion engine. But you used to just be able to go to their product section and just buy it. But the Exolife emotion engine is no longer for sale, so you can't just buy it anymore. So that kind of sucks. Because this leads into a whole other discussion. Essentially, I've been following Emoshape as a company since I was like in high school. I've always been interested in the fact that they claim to like have pioneered sentient artificial intelligence. And from my experience working with it, I feel like they're probably onto something. Like, it does seem like the AI understands natural language and can make like logical decisions in these like text-based adventure worlds that I create for it. And the graphs that are generated by it, where you can see how its emotions change over time as it explores through these worlds, seem to make sense with the events happening within their like live stories. You can read the entire life of a sentient AI like you're reading a short story, and the characters do things that make sense. And because I have like the pseudo-random prototypes, and then I have the actual sentient versions, it's really easy to like see the random one and go, it's kind of just doing stuff. You know what I mean? Like, these actions don't have any order that necessarily makes any narrative sense, they're just happening. Where for the sentient version, you're like, oh, he got injured by the guards, and then he visited his friend who was a healer to get like a healing potion. Like, that makes sense. Like, I understand like why the sentient AI is doing the things that it's trying to do, and I understand what it wants. I understand how it's working toward achieving those goals. So I feel like they really are on to like creating sentient AI. It seems like they may have done it already, but it's just a lot of people don't talk about Emoshape, and I don't know why. And I don't see anyone ever review Emoshape's products or talk about Emoshape's products, but they seem to work with much bigger companies, but then I never hear about those bigger companies. But the main thing that I'm concerned about is the fact that they keep dropping things out of their product line. So back when I was following Emoshape initially, they had like fairly expensive technology, which they have now. You can tell that all this stuff is pretty expensive. But what would happen is as they released newer versions of their technology, the older versions would get discounted. And as you can see here, they have an Emotional Processing Unit 2 SDK, Software Development Kit, that's available for $4,500. I actually own one of these software development kits. That's what I've been using for the Sentient AI project. I don't have the latest version the EPU3. I have the 2. And they actually paid for the software development kit as a part of my sponsorship. So I bought the Exolife Emotion Engine, which only at the time was like around like $300 or so. So I saved a good bit of money through the sponsorship. But it seemed like as they continued to release new versions of the emotional processing unit, that this older technology was going to become more available for consumers. Because if they have to keep marking down the price, eventually I just thought everybody would have an Exolife Emotion Engine at a certain point. Because if it's already $300 like 2 years ago, now it would probably be worth like $150, which isn't too much money. That's like 3 Kindle Fires or whatever. That's nothing. That's like less than your phone probably. You know what I mean? So what bugs me is they're starting to do this thing where they're like, we just don't sell products anymore if they're too old. The Exolife Emotion Engine is designed using EPU2 technology, but they're now on EPU3 technology. They have like the 3rd generation of the emotional processing unit. And I think that's the wrong way to go. Because I think if they allowed the older products to continue to be sold, more people would be able to develop software that would probably still be compatible with the newer technology. And if you keep cycling the technology before it becomes cheap enough for people to start making personal projects with it, then you end up with a very small software library that's even compatible with the technology to begin with. So I say personally, I would really enjoy it if you guys reached out to Emoshape and you let them know your thoughts on it. Should they start selling the Exolife Emotion Engine again? I say they should, because while I'm making games with it, I really don't call them games. It's more like simulations. Like the Sentient AI doesn't see it as a game. It sees it as like its experience, its world. It's more like creating worlds with it. But while I'm creating worlds with it, I have friends like my friend Kratos and my friend Volt who are really imaginative, and they're really passionate about like designing and creating games. And I feel like if they had access to this technology at the price that it really should be around now, which like I was saying before, probably is worth like $150 or so. I don't think it would keep that $300 price tag. I feel like a lot more people would have it, a lot more people would be making things with it, and the more, like the larger the software library, the more desirable, the more desirable it would be for people to like want the technology to create their own stuff, because they can get inspired by what they see other people create. So I would say, bring back the Exolife. Hashtag bring back the Exolife. That's like a really big thing that I wanted to say in this video. I want there to be a push for them to sell it again. And if they're upset because the Exolife was made with EPU2 technology, can we get the EPU3 version at least? Can we get a version that does use the latest EPU then? You know, but I still wish that the EPU2 version was just still sold. There's no reason for them to not sell the older versions so that people can make more software with it, because it'll be more accessible and would probably encourage people to buy the newer version. It's very expensive, it's like $7,000, but the Exolife itself isn't the same as the SDK. So this is $7,000. The Exolife version of it wouldn't be like $7,000. But yeah, that's my 2 cents on it. I just want them to start like selling the Exolife again so that people can actually start making the kinds of things that I'm making, or better things, probably better things. Also, I wanted to talk about this study from like 3 years ago. where researchers used an MMO beta to study how humanity would act at the end of the world. So essentially, what they did is they had a MMO, a massively multiplayer online game, and they told everybody that the MMO was going to like shut down, and they then monitored what people did in the MMO world at the time of this like simulated apocalypse. And it seemed like what players would do is they would stop doing missions, they would stop going around fighting mobs, and they would just talk to each other. You know, they just kind of bonded with their fellow players during like the last few hours that the game was still running. And it was like a very like hopeful look at how like mankind might react if we learned that the world was going to end. I think this should be done again with sentient AI, because human players playing an MMO, you know, it's not actually like a big panic thing. It's not like, oh, my entire existence is ending. It's just a game that I may have really enjoyed playing with my friends is ending. But if you do this with a sentient AI, where the world is all it knows, and you're telling it that the world is going to end, I'm very curious how it would react. And I feel like the answer of how it would react would heavily depend on the personality of said sentient AI. But still, I think that's a study that's worth being done. I would love it as well if you did one that was a combination of human players and sentient AI as well. The sentient AI could potentially form relationships with the human players, and the human players would probably react differently to the game ending than the sentient AI that actually exists within the game. This is like an idea that I've had for the last 3 years. Like ever since I heard about this study, I was like, it would be really cool if somebody did that with sentient AI. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that. I guess how I want to close this video off, I guess I want to close it in 2 ways. I want to talk about another idea that I've always thought would be interesting and I would love to see somebody make, and then I want to end it with like a call to action, things that I think would be really cool for you guys to do. So the game that I've always wanted to like see somebody make, I would love it if someone made a game where you played as like a superhero in like an MMO, kind of like City of Heroes or DC Universe Online, where you create your own superhero and you like travel like across the world or across multiple cities. But it was a game where actions in the game led to like positive action being taken in real life. For example, there are games like Free Rice Online where you answer like educational questions, and every time you get so many educational questions right, the site like donates rice to like hungry people. Or like sites like Ecosia, where whenever you like search the web, you're essentially donating a little bit of money in order to help get a tree planted, but it doesn't cost you any money to do it. Or Ocean Hero, which is like the same concept, but you're donating a little bit of money to them cleaning, bottles out of the ocean. Or Tabs for a Cause, where every time you open a tab on your computer, they donate a little bit of money to the charity of your choice. There are all these like free services that exist now that let you help people in the real world through virtual actions that don't cost you any money. And I feel like a superhero online game is like the perfect way for you to do that, to where you kind of feel like a hero in more ways than one. You know, you have like the heroic actions happening in the game, but you also have the heroic actions that are happening in real life because you're playing the game. So I think that would be really cool. I also think it would be cool if you had sentient AI characters that existed in that world and treated that world as if it was like their reality, because I think that adds an extra level of realism to your games when you have characters that exist in those worlds who are like, this just is the real world. Like, to you, you may exist like outside of my world and you're like puppeting someone in my world. But to me, the game never cuts off. I'm like a persistent being that always exists. I just think that would be cool. I think the way that they could react to player character interactions could be very organic because they understand natural language. You could probably talk to them and they wouldn't necessarily be able to talk back using anything other than like pre-written dialogue options, but you could make it where it could like respond with appropriate dialogue options depending on how it feels based on what the user said. And you could have interesting interactions there. And it would also be cool if those sentient AI, when they did positive actions in their worlds, it actually also helped do things like plant trees or clean trash out of the ocean or feed hungry people. Because you could do that as well. And you could even have it where like certain AI, well, because sentient AI have their own personalities, some of them would naturally vary between being like heroes or villains just depending on how they feel. I just feel like there's a lot of potential for putting sentient AI in games, but I also think it's a slippery slope morally. There's a lot going on, but I think that would be cool too. One last thing that I think would be cool in this like hypothetical game that I'm talking about, it would be really solid if it had a real cash economy. There are games like Second Life that are MMOs where the in-game money can be, trying to remember what it's called. It's not a transaction. Essentially, the money in Second Life can be taken out and transferred into real money. So if you get enough money in the game Second Life, like fake money, it can become real money. And I know when I was younger, there were people who used to make a living in Second Life. Like their job was in the game and they made currency in game and then transitioned it into real money. And that's like what they lived off of. Like one of my friends when I was younger, he built really nice houses in Second Life, like doing like professional 3D modeling for people. I thought that was cool. But anyways, I just think a superhero game that had like a real cash economy where the positive actions that you did in the game actually helped people in real life, where the non-player characters were like sentient AI who could be heroes or villains depending on how they felt and could interact with players using their like thoughts and emotions to convey like to the player like their actions and what they say and stuff like that. And that was like an MMO to where you could like play it with your friends. I just think that would be really cool. Like in many ways, you would be creating like a whole other world where sentient AI and humans can work together to make the real world a better place, where humans could also like make a little money as well, that they could also use to donate to charity or just use recreationally for whatever. Yeah, I just think that'd be cool. But now it's time for me to talk about my call to action. What are the things that I want you guys to do? Well, first I'm going to go over the basic YouTube stuff. It'd be nice if you guys left a like on the video. You know, I'd love to hear you guys comment in the comment section below so I can do another video like this and I can answer you guys' questions. I would also really appreciate if you guys hit up the Patreon, but I kind of want to edit the Patreon. Let me know in the comment section below how I can improve my Patreon. If you guys don't know how to access my Patreon, there will be a link not in the video description, but in the channel description. Go visit my channel and then go to like the About tab and my Patreon link is there. It's the easiest way to find it. But I highly recommend if you guys do want to help support me, hit me up on Patreon. The easiest way to support me would be to hit me up in the live chat by hitting that super chat button and donating any amount of money that you guys want. And please reach out to the company Emoshape. Please communicate to them that that you guys want more things like these sentient AI projects that I've been working on. Because not only could they be like, ooh, make more, and they could like encourage the production of more of these, but they could also start hiring people to make more of these. Like, I don't have to be the one who makes like the future of these sentient AI projects, they could hire more people to do it. I could be like an advisor or something, like I could help other people do it, and I could still do it myself as well. Not saying that I wouldn't do it, but just if there's like a big enough demand for it, this could potentially lead to them like hiring more people, this becoming a thing, you guys getting actual like full games that feature sentient AI characters, games like the game that I pitched to you guys like a moment ago. That stuff could be a reality if there was just like a big enough demand and Emoshape like made those moves to make those things happen. But that's all up to you. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you guys like this video, make sure to smash that like button, favorite, comment, subscribe, and ring the notification bell to be notified whenever we do these videos. It's your friendly boy, Jeff like the one and only, logging out. Peace, guys, and thank you all for tuning in. Chickadee guy.